Glad you're all here, those of you who are. And I want to start with a quote. You remember, did any of you use this book through the conversations thing? It's a wonderful book, and there's a quote, some few quotes near the end that I thought I would use to start with. I thought they were kind of special. In his last chapter, he has a large quote from Jack London, and I just took one line of it, and he said, am I too loud? I hear, no, okay. The proper function of man is to live, not to just exist. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here today. He also said, we can indeed continue to grow physically, intellectually, spiritually, and throughout our lifetime. It is our choice that are major determinants that are the major determinant of the quality, and for some, the quantity of their lives. And the third quote that I'd like to share is, stress need not be the constant, unwanted companion in our lives. Seeing each moment as a gift it is, and reaping the huge health rewards that are associated with the freedom from chronic stress. And then using my own words, reducing stress by understanding the value of the gift you are giving to yourself and to your family by planning ahead is just one step towards peace of mind and freeing yourself to enjoy more of life now. And all of you who are here are doing that. You're starting that process for yourself. And you've been doing it, those of you who attended the other two seminars. I hope they were helpful to you and that all of this is fed into your knowledge and your ability to take care of yourself and your family and enjoy life at this point in time. I always ask this silly question that I know the answer for. Is anyone here not going to die? I think we all do it. It's a natural part of life. Everybody eventually dies. Most of us, in this room particularly, are fortunate enough to live to your 80s and 90s, and some even to 100. But sadly, we know that some die much younger. And I believe strongly that everyone past 50 should plan ahead. If you don't talk about dying, if you don't like to talk about dying, you're not alone. Most people don't like to talk about it. But if you don't take care of the necessary legal papers and personal wishes before your death and share them with your heirs, you will be adding to the distress that they experience at losing you. Too often, that does erupt into family feuds because one child wants to do one thing, another do another, and before you know it, there's tension and hostility in the family. You can help avoid that when you plan ahead. I want to tell you why I do these seminars. 8 years ago, my husband died. Al and I had made detailed advanced preparations. Our adult children were involved in the process, and they'd all received copies of our wills and other papers. And I was capable of following that plan. And they were able to help me. Even so, it was almost 3 months before that last letter was answered and before that last phone call was received and that all of the process was completed. Over the years, I've met with a lot of people who have not made their final plan. And I've learned how much more complicated and how much more time and extra money it costs when the decisions had not been made in advance. And of course, the friction between the children. I wondered if it would help others if I shared my story and the kind of information that you received from the seminar so far. So I asked around, and many people said yes, it would. And this is the 5th time I'm doing this program here at Rolling Green. And though we don't officially address this in detail in this seminar, it might be a good idea as you learn these things for yourself to ask your adult children, have they made their will? It's never too early to gain peace of mind by planning ahead. Do you all remember the story of Terri Schiavo in Florida? She was a 50-year-old woman who lay in a coma. She had told her husband that she didn't want to stay alive on machines, but her parents didn't know, and it wasn't written down anywhere. And it ended up in a feud between the parents and the husband, and she was on the machines for a very long time. The parents refused to have the machines turned off. You could prevent that by having your wishes written and shared with your family before the need is there, no matter what age you are. When my husband was dying, we invited all our adult children into our home. He told them what was happening. He had his physician's approval to stop the dialysis machine that had kept him alive for almost 6 years, and his condition kept getting worse. Our son did not want him to do that, and so Al agreed to delay that for a while as he and Ron talked about it. After 2 weeks of almost daily conversation, Ron understood and said, okay. Off the machines, Al lived for another 2 weeks, but we all understood and came together to share our memories of our lives with him. Where does it all start? Conversations, and they're courageous conversations. The person who starts the problem needs courage. I don't know if any of you have started these kinds of conversations with your family. Some of you have. What kind of reception do you get? Were they willing, or how anxious were you as you did it? Were there any? Your family was comfortable?
Oh, yes.
They wanted to get rid of you. No, but I'm sure they didn't. I know your family. But sometimes people, the family members, have a very difficult time. Come on in. Accepting that you want to talk about that. And it does take courage to bring it up. So far, you've received information from the attorney, geriatric social worker, hospice, and a funeral parlor. With little, but it will do little to reduce your stress and the stress of your heirs if you don't share this information with them. And I'm being redundant a few times on that. It's so important, that point of if you do it yourself and they don't know what you've done, it might as well not be done, really. It's the attorney would know, but nobody else knows what you want. I prepared a handout as a guide for you. You'll see it on your chairs there. I think it's an additional thing that most attorneys or CPAs don't even think to tell you about. Most of us today have computers. Most everybody here has a computer. And I don't know about you, but I do all my banking online. I have passwords of all my accounts online and important contact numbers. And how are the kids going to find that out? They're going to have to close out your accounts. They're going to have to do something about that. And so the handout that you have there, you may want to take a quick look at it now, and you can look at it in detail later, but it includes everything that's in your, on your passwords, your contacts, your home phone, your cell phone, the names and contacts of your children. I even have my outdoor garage door opener listed there, and where my keys are and what they're for, what my primary email is and the password, answers to secret questions, because all of these accounts want secret questions and you have to make up good answers. I even have my Greenville Library PIN number there. And of course the bank account, credit card, debit card, online ID, all of that. So that's important that you list these as well and put them where your children can see them. I have in here Duke Energy, Microsoft account, CPA, attorney, my virus protector. I use Geek Squad a lot to help me out with things, and so I have that in there too. Of course, Odyssey here at Rolling Green, where you can get a lot of information to fill in there for the kids. About your prepaid funeral expenses, about your Medicare and any supplements that you have. Long-term insurance, if you have any charities that you give to that you want the kids to know about. If you have a passport, driver's license, social security number, all of that, and this is a good list to use to add to your legal papers, and it can be put right with it. Okay, we got that one, and of course share it with your children. What I've done with all of these pieces of information is I've put them on in the same place where I keep my wills, and the children know where they are. I also have something there on my checking account. I didn't make copies of this, but you can look at it passing. I'll pass it around if you like. What I have on my checking account is POD, that means paid on death, so that my children had to go to the bank, provide their social security number, sign some papers, and then we could put their names on the checking account with the POD on it, so that at the time I die, they'll be able to access the money right away. They don't have to wait and go through any kind of a process. I thought that was a pretty helpful thing to do, and they did too. They want my money. Okay. Let's see. Okay, am I overwhelming you so far? Any questions so far? Yes.
One of them that you don't have on here on this list is one that I ran into, and that was our donor cards.
A donor card. Yes, that should be there also. Thank you. You know, if you have organs, want to be donor, you should have that listed, and you should let them know where that card is so they can get access to it. That's very good. I'm going to add that.
You know, it's an interesting story about how we found Rogers was that, well, I knew that he had, but 3 or 4 days before he died, he asked me to go get his wallet. And so I got his wallet, and he said, he looked at it, he handed it to me, and he said, there's $100 bill in there, and I want you to give it to our son-in-law's name is Bill. I want you to give it to Bill the minute I die.
Okay.
So I ran and got the wallet, and I handed it to Bill, and I said, there's $100 bill, and he told me to give it to you immediately.
Wow.
Bill opened it, and couldn't find the $100 bill. I opened it, couldn't find the $100 bill. But my daughter picked it open. She looked and she said, here it was between his 2 donor cards. And he wanted us, the $100 had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
He wanted us to know.
See the
that
donor card. Did everybody hear June? Jane. Did everybody hear Jane? She's talking about the fact of a donor, an organ donor card. You know, if you have a pre-decided decision to donate your organs, of course your medical doctors and everybody has to know about that in advance. But she also had a husband who was playing tricks on them in a way because he wanted to make sure that they found the donor card and went for it. And so he hid a $100 bill in it to make it come alive for them. That's a pretty cute idea. He had a sense of humor. Yes?
Isn't that one for driver's license? Yeah, that's what I want.
Wait just a minute. We want to make sure we hear everybody hears everybody.
Isn't it on the back of the
It usually isn't. Is it listed on your driver's license?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a.
It is, but most people don't look at it there.
Yeah, I have a separate card as well. Yeah, but it could be on your driver's license, but people have to know it's there.
Yeah, and the
Right.
thing is that you need to know immediately, so that we did call immediately.
Right.
And we were not able to use it. But
So it has to be done as soon as you die, and of course,
yeah.
if you're using hospice, they need to know about it. Your children need to know about it in advance. Would you mind? Thank you. Judy's going to help us with the microphone. Okay. Because everything you have to say is important, and somebody else may not have thought about it, and it's worth hearing. We want to hear you. Okay. We're being very, very serious, and I think it's time that I followed up with my husband's philosophy. Am I making too much noise? It feels like it, no? With my husband's philosophy of life, which was humor relieves much pain and eases much stress. So here's a story that touches. Back up.
Move it a little further away.
Further away. Is that still good? Okay, great. Thank you. Here's a story that touches on planning and humor. An elderly man lay dying in his bed. Suddenly, he smelled the aroma of his favorite chocolate chip cookies. Gathering his remaining strength, he lifted himself from the bed, struggled to get down the stairs, and with labored breath, he reached the kitchen and saw literally trays, hundreds of his favorite chocolate chip cookies, all over the kitchen counter. Had he died? Was he in heaven? Or was it a last heroic act of love from his very devoted wife? With one great final effort, he threw himself toward the table, landing on his knees, put the cookie in his mouth, and seemed to bring him back to life. When his wife yelled, "Stay away from those, they're for the funeral." I'm just as good as Bob Benson in that, huh? Right. Yeah, okay. So, I'm repeating myself here, but when you include your family in your preparation, you can live today, enjoy your life the way Dr. Landy suggests that we do more things for ourselves, and have a lot more peace of mind for ourselves and our children. And we have to realize that we're not only giving them a gift of peace of mind, that it's an act of love, and it usually saves money too. And I think you all realize that it's a good idea to do this planning well before you're critically ill. I think that's an important piece to add there. All right, on another serious topic, do any of you have DNRs? You know what a DNR is? It's a do not resuscitate. Now, I think you can see, and you see me around the halls here, I'm fortunately a very healthy person. For my 87 years, I can't believe how well I am. And yet, I asked my doctor to sign a DNR for me. Because if and when, or not if, but when things happen, I just don't want to hang around. I want to let me go. But of course, if we call the EMS, what are they going to do? It's their rule that they have to resuscitate unless they are handed a DNR or it's very visible so that they know it's right there. So if you have one, put it where it can be seen. I had it on the back up, okay.
Don't hold it.
Oh,
Just speak.
is that better? Okay. I did have it on my refrigerator, which had been suggested, but the hospice people the other day said, put it on your headboard. And I thought about it, and I said, I wonder how will my kids react if they see it on the headboard. So I told them about it, and they said, Mom, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He said, well, put it on your headboard. We'll know where it is. So we did that. Okay, and that's an important piece to have there. Okay. All right, so some of you already told me that you have had these family discussions, you've had meetings together about how this goes. But sometimes some of the adolescent behaviors of your adult children might begin to show as you begin to talk. I want to do it this way, I want to do it that way. Oh, I want to have that, you can have that. And I don't like the way Mom decided that she wants to just not have any help when she's very sick, to pull all the plugs. I don't want that. I want her to live. And these arguments can go on, and their sibling rivalries can grow up. And so what do you do about that? Is it going to happen with the one day that you talk? Maybe not. I mean, maybe you have angelic children, but I have children who are pretty close, but there are differences that come up. And so in my previous life, I was a family therapist. And I had a lot of families that came in and they brought their children, their adult children, and we talked it over. And somehow with a third party there, an outside party, it made things better. Some people do well using their clergy, asking their clergy to come in and work with them and having the family together. So it's a strong thing to do to ask for outside help. It's always a strong thing to do to ask for help. When you do have the family meetings, you want to know what each person thinks about what you've been talking about. You share initially about what you've done about the attorney and the other things there, and then you ask them, what do you think about it? Do you want to do anything differently? Do you have any other ideas? How do you feel about it? And the important thing in those meetings, one of the things that I think some of us do not do as well as we might, is listen. Don't right away say, oh no, that's not the way it is. Don't right away say, I don't like it that way. But listen, because they have feelings and concerns and ideas that maybe you could benefit from too. So give them a chance to tell you and acknowledge their ideas when they come up. Validate them, even if you don't agree with them. You know, it's nice of you to give those thoughts and talk about that. If you can't get all together on agreeing to, especially your living will, which people get hung up on, or about your real property, which we haven't talked about at all. But you know what your real property is. You know, your will takes care of all of your estate property, money and stuff like that. Your real property is your furniture, your clothing, your little knickknacks and trinkets and your books that have meant something to you. Who will want them? Sometimes nobody wants them, but what are they going to do with them? Who do you want to give it to if the kids don't want it? Those things should be talked about. And what I've done with my kids, and they laugh at me sometimes, Mom, you're doing all this planning. But they're glad. They're really glad, because what I've done is, like, I have one granddaughter that wanted my bedroom set. So I took a little red sticker like the movers use when they come around and move furniture, and I stuck it on the bedroom set and put her name on it. So there will be no arguments. I have a beautiful card playing table. And one grandson said, gee, he'd like to have that. His name is under the table, and also is listed. And all of these items that the kids have wanted are listed and on a place next to my will. It's put in the same box that the will is. And they all know where that is. So all of those things are important that you take care of and that you talk about. Okay, I want to take another breath and maybe laugh a little bit. A little boy asked his grandpa, Grandpa, can you croak like a frog? Grandpa was surprised at this question and asked his grandson why he wanted to know. Because, answered the boy, Daddy said that when Grandpa croaks, we can all go to Disney World. Okay. I handed something out here that I want to go over a little bit with you. I have it up here. Go. Here it is. I wanted you to see this. This is a free booklet from the AARP. And I had 60 of them that I've received, and I've given some out at the Alzheimer's support group that we do. But I have given you all this booklet now. In the front of it, it has a lot of information about caregiving in particular, and a glossary defining terms that are used as you become a caregiver. But near the back of it, it gives you a place to make a checklist for yourself. A checklist about your personal information, your marriage certificate, social security card, military record, anything, your address book list, anything that might be pertinent that your kids may have to know after you pass away. And home maintenance lists, what you pay, who takes care of what the security is, what the garbage service is even, because all of that, somebody needs to know that. And then there's a health checklist listing all your doctors and your dentists and anything that they may need from that, and your Medicare cards and your do not resuscitate order. So it's a good thing to have this, and you could even share it with your children in advance if they wanted to look into it. It has an information for your financial checklist, about your public benefits checklist, if you have any low-income property, food assistance, if you have any extra help from Medicare Part D, what that's all about, transportation assistance. And it comes up with a caregiving plan. Now, this is for while you're ill, there may be some things in there that your children can learn from, and by having it in here. And then it has a weekly plan. It has lots of open space if you want to write additional notes. I think it's a worthwhile booklet. I also printed something out for you called Is Your Emergency File Up to Date? All of you who live at Rolling Green know that your healthcare area, Linda Schuler will tell you, are supposed to have your full medical record, who your doctors are, and what all your legal plans are, your wills, etc., your living will. So it's an important thing that you check and see that you've done all of this and that you have it where you need to have it. I also ask here about the advance directive. Has everybody read it? Is the person who's in charge ready to activate it? That's another thing that somehow I skipped over and I don't know how. But when you have these family meetings, you're going to assess who's willing and able to be your power of attorney. That's the person that takes care of your money when you're not able to do it, even when you're alive, and who will follow up initially after you pass away. You have a health care advocate or associate, they call them different things, but this is the person in your family that is able to activate your living will, your 5 wishes, and speak to the people who are in charge at that time and talk about that. And you need to pick that rather carefully. Now, I have 3 children. My son is going to be my power of attorney because he has pretty good knowledge about finances and stuff. My youngest daughter, Heidi, some of you know, she's my healthcare advocate. And why? Because she can handle stressful things very easily, and she can very clearly go into these different medical things and say, you know, this is what my mother wants, and you stick to it, like getting off a machine or something, or not going on a machine. So I feel confident that she can handle it. My oldest daughter, Wendy, is very emotional. She could not handle that, although she would be the most appropriate one to do it. So I've given her another assignment. And her assignment is, I've made a list of the kind of music I want in my memorial, and the one prayer that I do want in it. And also I've asked her to write my obit. She's a very good writer, so she'll make me look good. So each one has an assignment that they've agreed to and that they're comfortable with, and that you're comfortable that they're going to be able to handle it. I think it's real important. Questions? Any questions coming up now? Yes, Russ?
What if you, in your will, you have spelled out someone that you're executor, and it turns out a person lives in another state and says the laws are different in South Carolina than where he is? Can you just reassign someone?
I don't know the legal answer to that, but I know that you have to have a will that is agreed with the South Carolina law. So I would check with a local attorney and ask them. Do you know, George?
I think you do. Accepted in South Carolina, but the executor doesn't have to live in South Carolina. Now, I have two sons, and neither one of them live in South Carolina, and the one is the executor.
Yeah, but my nephew who lives in Delaware.
I don't know,
laws
and
up
you,
there aren't
you know, you could also find out, Greenville has something called Everplans. It's on the internet. And if you put everplans.com, they may have an answer for you there. Or you could check with an attorney and just ask that question specifically. I don't know the answer to that. Yes, Don?
I just had my will redone when I moved here in June, and my son will be the executor, lives in Salt Lake City, and the attorney had no problem.
Oh, okay. All right.
It happened with us too.
All right. So that's good to know. Thank you for asking that. See, we all learned something from each other here. Yes, Herb.
Can you go online on the internet and get a sample financial power of attorney? Is that a separate piece of paper from the other power of attorney?
Yeah, you should have a separate piece of paper that says power of attorney and the duties of the power of attorney. And did you have an attorney draw up your will?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Herb.
Well, I have a will.
I'm kidding you.
We're in a whole process of doing this.
Okay.
Trying to get everything
So
together.
yes, I have a separate power of attorney paper and I have a separate healthcare advocate paper so that the people know specifically this is what they're doing. Yeah. And your attorney will advise you on that. Any other questions? Okay. Now you're going to have a treat because Chaplain Newton, it's your turn. Huh?
You still have time.
I still have time. Does anybody want any more information or questions or, we have a bright audience here. We got through it fast. Yes, Linda? You may have the mic.
I know I've said this a lot. The best way to get the the paperwork that has all your medical stuff is, all of your doctor's office have gone on electronic medical records, and every time that you go to the doctor's office, he can print that off for you. It has your updated medicines. It has your past history of your illnesses or surgeries and all that kind of stuff. If that one just doesn't have all of it, he does a history and physical once a year that has every bit of that. And that's what we're looking for in the emergency response form. because I've gone on calls lately and they haven't been updated since 2007. So the medications weren't correct. The doctor's office that I actually called for help, they didn't call me back because she hadn't seen that doctor in years. And if we don't have that information, we cannot care for you. And I have probably a handful of people, every time they go to the doctor's office, they bring me a piece of paper and ask me to put that in their medical record file in healthcare. And I take the old one out, put the new one in. Now, if you are a part of the clinic, when you have a doctor's office, from my office, that automatically, when I get that printed out, it goes upstairs. So you don't have to do anything unless you see a specialist or something like that. But that's the best way to do that, instead of having to write it all down and get it to me or Maggie or something, because that's a big effort with over almost 600 people to try to get those things on a regular basis all the time. And but it certainly will help. And I've said it a lot, but it doesn't click. But that's why when they went to the electronic medical records, it's already in the computer, so they just print it. And
so then do
we
we
can
just
get
tell
it.
the doctors to send it to you?
No, you just I want a copy of my progress notes for the day.
You want the hard copy?
Just give me a copy of the progress note.
Okay.
And then, or you could probably on my chart, you probably can download it because it has there too.
So if we do that, we don't have to update our file
No,
every year.
the files are
It's updated.
updated.
Okay.
The biggest thing that's coming up in 2018, and I may be wrong, you're all getting a new number.
Yeah.
And so everybody in this room has to give us new cards.
That's the
Or-
Social Security number. You know, they're changing
Well, we're
it.
going to have the Social Security number, but your Medicare card, everybody will get a new Medicare card, and that's the one that your medical records, it'll be an MR number, and that means medical records number. And they'll be using that for all of your hospitals and everything together.
And was this the one you keep in the refrigerator?
You would make a copy for your refrigerator for EMS, because they're going to look at the same thing. We're in the process of revamping how we do the emergency calls because we're trying to get to you quicker. We have eliminated probably 95% of the false alarms. The new medallions that you're wearing, the little square ones, are harder. They're not harder to activate, but you don't just bump and turn them on. The older ones, the squarer ones, you could just bump and it sends it off, and then it says where you have the new one. That's the new one.
The new ones are good.
The new ones are really good, but if you get in a panic and you hold it and you keep holding it, it does not activate until you let it go, and it takes 45 seconds to go up to the satellite and come back to the computer. So the longer you hold it in a panic, you can't just touch it either. It doesn't work that way. You got to push it.
So should we all get this new?
Everybody, I would say that probably 85% of the people have the new ones, and they're changing so many per month, so that 100% by probably the end of the year we'll have the new medallion. You can, or you're probably in a line of people that they're changing them out every month. But I mean, you can ask for one and tell them that you heard that they were better. I just don't. If it's their idea, you don't get charged. If it's your idea, you might get charged, and I don't want you to be charged. Or you can ask.
Turn in the old one,
You turn in the old one. Yeah.
which I've never used.
I know, I just found out a couple of weeks ago, my niece fell, I take her to the emergency room. St. Francis has its own version of my chart. And
Right.
you go to a Greenville Hospital System owned doctor, and so many of them that are, they have my chart.
Right.
Now,
They're
never
not
between
connected.
shall meet, but I found out from the ER gal, she said that my name was at Bunce's Pickle, and
He found out what? I didn't
that
understand.
a doctor under certain situations who is owned by Bon Secours, St. Francis, under certain situations, he can get off My Chart Grayville Hospital System and get your medication, the copy of that My Chart. Yep. So you might want
I
to
don't-
remember that.
I don't know about it, but
Yeah.
the,
You have to have your own password, and you have to
Yeah.
give them a password.
right,
But the idea is when you go to a doctor, you have them printed out and we give it to you.
yeah.
Okay.
And I don't keep them in my office. I make holes in them and take them upstairs the same day that you give them to me.
Okay.
Same thing with your insurance cards. If these numbers when they start coming in, whoever, whether you give them to Dorothy or give them to me, we're all going to take the old ones out and put the new ones in. And
You know, another thing with Linda, several months ago, we had a situation where, we could not find the resident became ill and had to be hospitalized. It was almost midnight on a Friday night, and we could not find any information of any of her family. They were on vacation, and she couldn't tell us, and we couldn't find the information anywhere,
Yeah.
nor could the EMTs. So it's
Occasion-
important also for everybody whose kids go on vacation, and
Right.
they're allowed
yeah.
to make sure that in that red envelope that they
At
put
least
a
in the
number.
red envelope. I have a lot of families because
Yeah.
I've been here so long. They'll call me when they're going to be out of town and say, "This is my emergency contact."
Yeah.
The last thing that I'm going to say is the government made a decision about 2 years ago that emergency list that you said these people are supposed to be notified, we can no longer notify them unless you guys give us a letter that says, I want these people notified. If I'm unable to call them in an emergency situation, I want them to know that I went to the hospital. If you don't want them to be notified, then don't give me a letter. But I'm actually trying to make those copies on a different color so it'll stand out in the emergency file so that we can give that to EMS too. At least them call, especially if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, because they might want to wait till the hospital gets more information. I'm always glad to answer any questions. Now Shannon is new and she's on vacation, but she'll be here tomorrow. She's your new advocate for independent living. She's going to take half of my job away, but I'm still going to be there for you because I've been here and I'm still your mama.
She sure is.
And but Shannon will be. She'll have the time to spend 45 minutes in your apartment or your house, talking about issues, talking about concerns, talking about results. Maybe we should do this or that. And I've given her everything that I have in my little brain. Well, let's, good resources and all the kinds. I made a whole book for her before she even got here.
How do people reach her?
She's got her own phone number. I just got her business cards. Come down and meet her. She's really, really sweet. She started at Rolling Green as a nursing assistant. She became an LPN. She graduated, got her RN, has a year experience working in the hospital. She's very, very smart, very, very compassionate, and very sweet. And she's going to be a great asset to Rolling Green. And my life got a little easier. You won't see me. I probably will lose the Roadrunner meet one because I can stay much closer to the clinic where I'm there, because you can say, well, Linda's not there. I can't get my blood pressure checked because Linda's not there, and I'll be able to stay closer to that. Now, I still may get called to apartments and that kind of stuff. I've been to 3 today. But we're going to it's a team effort here. She'll be my boss, and Abby will be on top of us, and then Ryan will be on top of us, and then you know how it goes around here. But I mean, it's going to be a really good team effort. So, but I'm still your.
Okay, now you are all in for a treat. as we take it away from the mundane to the spiritual, and Chaplain Newton will lead us in that.
As we are going to shift and talk about spirituality, and we're coming up on Halloween, I'll share one story of a small town that there was an abandoned house, lots of rumors that it was haunted, that there was a spirit that lived in that, and so there's a lot of suspicion about that. A lot of folks were afraid of it, and finally there was a brave, intrepid photographer who decided that he would go and stay in that house and see if he could document whether there was a spirit present in that house or not. And so during the night, that spirit did manifest itself. He could see the ghost, and he said, "Is it all right if I take a picture?" And the spirit said yes. And so he did, and then he rushed to his dark room to take the picture, and it was grossly underexposed. And so it seemed to be one of those cases where the spirit was willing, but the flash was weak. So, yeah, I've been working with Bob too long. Is that right? All right. So we will be talking about spirituality and end-of-life issues. And as we do this, I want to think about why this is important and how it affects us and who we're talking about and so forth. I think it's important for us to talk about spirituality, and it's good that it's coming here at the end, because I think it does serve as something of a counterbalance or perhaps an alternative to the prevailing medical model for addressing end-of-life concerns. One of the things that I've been pleased with this 3-week series is that it hasn't been focused solely on the medical model. It's talking about larger issues of life, and I think that's a very important thing, other than just what medications need to be taken and health care and so forth, because life is much bigger than just that. And I think it's also an appropriate wrap-up for the preceding sessions. We've talked about legal issues and care management and hospice and funeral plans, and now just having talked about these hard end-of-life conversations. In my way of thinking, that most of these decisions that are made in all these areas that we've talked about over these 3 weeks, that there is a spiritual dimension to those. And I hope you'll see why I say that. But whether we're talking about selection of a power of attorney, medical power of attorney, advanced health care directives, wills, selections of personal representatives, hospice decisions, funeral choices, all of these potentially reflect the spirituality of the individual involved. And they all point to the necessity of having those hard conversations. And I think that's a really important thing. So thank you, June, for that. Well, what is spirituality? I doubt that I can give you a definition that everybody will agree with, because as I looked for it, I never found any two that were exactly alike. So there are a lot of different approaches to defining this. But basically, it just concerns those larger issues of life. What is the ultimate meaning of life? What are the values that we have? Now, we talked about a will just a moment ago. In making your will, that should be a reflection of the things that are important in your life and what you would like to see happen to those things in your life. So I hope you can see those types of connections. It has to do with our deepest sense of who we are and what life is all about, our sense of peace, purpose, connection to others, and connection to the transcendent, whatever that might be in one's particular mindset. Now, how's that distinct from religion? Religion is usually thought of as an organized system of beliefs, practices, rituals, symbols, designed to facilitate closeness to the sacred and transcendent and to foster religious community. So, spirituality and religion, are they the same? Okay, so is it either or? You can be spiritual or you can be religious? No, I hope it will be both and. I hope it's both and. For me, religion that is devoid of spirituality it's a pretty cold thing, and I don't think you'd find much comfort in it at all. So we need to have both of these things. And so we see that overlap, that intersection with both spirituality and religion, meaning and connection and so forth with spirituality, religion, practices and rites and rituals, what's right and wrong, what's true and false. But in the common ground is where we talk about beliefs and comfort and reflection and ethics and that sense of awe, that sense of connecting with something so much bigger than us. Now, as we talk today about end-of-life issues, whose end-of-life issues are we talking about? I'm just going to kind of slide all around the place instead of trying to stick with just one of these, because I think we'll see that there's a lot of overlap. Are we going to be talking about just those who are in the process of dying? No. What about the family when they're facing the prospect of a loved one who is dying? Well, we will be talking about that, but it may also be a family who's in the process of coming to grips with their grief after the death of a loved one. So I think there are major spiritual issues that touch on all of these and all these scenarios here, both someone who's at the end of the journey and facing that end of life. And I hope too that for us, and from what I can tell, we're all a long way away from that. I hope that there may be some things that we might pick up and learn as we walk through this that will help us in our days of health to prepare for that as well. So I want to kind of divide this up and just talk about several different things. First topic is just what are some of those spiritual issues, and I'll be tapping into several studies that have been done, some surveys that have been done about regrets that those who are in the process of dying that they have expressed. What are some of the common regrets that are heard from those who are in that process? And those might be helpful for us. It might be helpful for us to understand those who are in the process of dying. And it might be helpful for us to be sure that we live our lives such that we don't have those kinds of regrets. And then I'll touch a little bit on some of the issues that might intersect with that medical or that health area. And then finally, more directly to some of the spiritual issues that relate to religion and faith, and that'll be my more comfort zone there. So, but let's look at some of these regrets. These are issues that are drawn from studies of common regrets of those who are dying. There are multiple lists that you might find, and I kind of merged several of these to come up with our list. And I think we'll see that almost all of these touch on components of spirituality, and we'll see these regrets often translate into spiritual issues for those related to the dying as well. Now, each of the slides on this, most of that on the bottom, we're not going to talk about all of that, but that's just for your reference. If you're wondering, what does this have to do with spirituality? That's a little checklist there. Does it address meaning of life? What's life all about? Purpose of life? Who am I? Values, beliefs, sense of peace, harmony, connection to others, and to the transcendent. So when we look at this first regret, I wish I'd lived my own life, not the life that others expected of me. Is there anything on the checklist of spirituality in that regret? Okay, glad at least one person sees it. Okay, yeah.
At that point in your life, there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, that is one of the concerns. But this is what they are talking about at the end of life, because there's nothing that they can do about it at that point, other than the few days or weeks or months that they have left to try to do something other.
And usually they're not in health to do something that they would want to do.
Right. But one thing for us, though, for those who may relate to those who are having these regrets, is for us to understand what they may be feeling, some of the things that they are hurting over, so that we can relate to them better and give them comfort in their latter days. And again, for those of us who we all hope are a long way out from that end of the journey, these are some things for us to think about as well. So when someone is having this regret, you talk about who's affected. It does affect the dying, and this is a spiritual issue for them, because this kind of regret does impinge on their well-being, their spiritual well-being. And so for those of us who are with them, we need to be aware of these types of things they may be feeling in order to minister to them and to encourage them in the last leg of their journey. Yes?
And maybe pass it on to our children. Like if
Yes.
something's happening and you're in the last stages of your life,
Mm-hmm.
is pass that on to your children. That
Absolutely.
you would like to have done something differently than what was expected.
Absolutely.
And they should do that in their life.
And this could be folded well into those conversations
Right.
that kids at this point in my life, this is a lesson that I've learned, and don't make the same mistake that I did.
Yeah,
Okay.
following up on that, this is all about when they're actually dying. But many of us in this room, being the ages that we are, and having the information we have now, have the opportunity of making those changes to some degree, so that by the time our 5 or 10 years comes along, we will have made those changes, at least in a small way, that makes us feel better about ourselves, and perhaps makes our family feel better about us.
Yep. Yeah, and this was the most common one that popped up on several different lists and was always up at the top. Most common regret of all, when people are at the point of taking stock of their life and kind of reviewing it, and they look back on it, they see that they once had a lot of dreams, and a lot of them never were realized. They never really acted on them. And so they begin to have this kind of regret. And, health brings a freedom that a lot of folks don't realize until they lose it. And so a lot of these dreams could have been acted on in the earlier age, but it would be very difficult later on. So some of these things can teach us some good lessons that we can pass on to our kids that we leave behind. Yes. So look around, find out what makes you happy, and then act on it. Very similar to that, I wish I discovered my purpose earlier. People who are dying often have this regret. The number of years that you spend outside your purpose is the number of years that you spend living somebody else's life. So it's just very important for us to identify what is your purpose, what is your reason for being, and then to follow through on that. This is another one right up at the top on every list. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. One comment that so many folks made is no one, at the point of death, no one ever said, I wish I had worked harder. There's always, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So no one ever says, I wish I'd worked harder, I wish I had worked longer. In one study, the person who put the information together said that this was something that she heard in that hospice type situation where she worked from every male patient that she had. Every one of them said this. They realized that they had missed their children's youth. They had missed their partner's companionship. Women spoke of it sometimes, but in that older generation, many times they were not a breadwinner. But all of the men in this one particular survey deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of work. So I think that's one of the things I know I've been guilty of it, and maybe you have too. What about those millennials? Have anybody ever said that? What about that younger generation? We sometimes say that, but one of the things that I do notice with them, with many millennials, is that they are working a lot harder at striking a balance in life than perhaps we did in our earlier years. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Many people suppress their feelings in order to keep peace with others. We just keep it inside, and so we just kind of settle rather than expressing ourselves and holding out for what we really are feeling. We just let it go and press it down. And one of the things that happens with that sometimes, if we deny those feelings, is that Linda can probably vouch for this, but she's gone. Is that many times when we do that, it affects us in areas of health as well, both physical and emotional health, because of the resentment or bitterness that comes with that. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends is another one. It is so easy to get so busy with life, or if we move away or something, just lose touch with our friends. We don't realize the full benefit of old friends until sometimes we're nearing the end and trying to take stock of that. We get so caught up in our lives, so we let those wonderful long-term friendships just slip by. I think one of the things, maybe it's because it's one of those other regrets, work too hard. We work too hard to have the time to massage, to manage those types of relationships. It's interesting to me that sometimes we see with dementia patients having conversations with old friends. They are meeting with old friends. We don't see them there in the room, but they do. And they're having those conversations with old friends. So while to us those friends aren't present in the room, the dementia patient is having just a wonderful reunion and a delightful conversation with an old friend that they call by name. So I think that's something that maybe we need to do that before, and just maybe get back in touch with some of those friends that we've lost track of. I wish that I'd let myself be happier. This is another surprisingly common one. Many didn't realize until the end that happiness is a choice. They had been kind of stuck in old patterns and old ruts. The so-called comfort of familiarity. Fear of change. Anybody in here not like change? Yeah, that's one thing that's so easy for us to get caught in routines, and even if our routines aren't things that bring us a lot of pleasure, we have the comfort of the familiar at least. And so rather than risking finding anything more pleasant than that, we just stay with what we've got. We just stay there. I wish I had taken more risks. And that comes with that idea of playing it safe sometimes, just being very cautious. Again, we just want to play safe, live carefully, seek security. And having a safe and secure life is that's not a bad thing at all. But it can be if it hinders us from fulfilling our purpose. I wish I had taken better care of myself. Yeah. Now, have I gone to meddling? Yeah, a common regret, especially for those who are facing the end of time and they're struggling with an illness or an ailment of some kind. So many times we take our body for granted, take our emotional well-being for granted too. And we eat those things we shouldn't be eating, and we don't sleep as much as we should. We don't exercise as often as we ought to, and in some cases we work so hard that we forget to take a vacation. Has anybody ever just not taken all your vacation time? Anybody? Am I the only one? Okay, thank you. All right. So again, that's that balance that's so important. Life should be lived with a balance, and taking care of yourself so you can live a long, healthy, and happy life should be a top priority. Now we get more to some legacy things. I wish I had touched more lives and inspired more people. There's a college university in Spartanburg. Y'all ever heard of Wofford College? Yeah, there's a monument on the lawn in front of the main building to the Woffords, for whom the college was named. And besides just the very simple, as I understand that he did not want a monument of any kind, but they did this anyway. Besides just the name and dates and so forth, there's a Latin inscription on it. And it simply says, if you seek a monument, look around you. If you seek a monument, look around you. He did not want to be remembered for the campus, for the buildings, and that type of thing. He wanted to be remembered for the lives that were changed and affected by education and by the culture of the school. And I think that's part of a legacy that all of us would want to leave. That when we are gone from this place, that there will be people left behind whose lives are different in a better way because of us having been here. And so when we get older,
I'd like to make one comment.
Sure.
We live in an environment here at Rolling Green where we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Make
Yep.
that your goal. I try to make somebody laugh every day,
Yeah,
and that's not hard.
and that's a good goal. You just have to tell better jokes than some of us do.
I think this is a great opportunity living in this community
Yes.
to smile at somebody, say something nice to them. They feel better for the moment, and you feel better for having done it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I'll touch on another opportunity in just a moment. Another one, again, is touching on legacy issues. I wish I had been a better partner or a better parent. This is huge. This is really, really huge, because those relationships, spouse and child, Those are the most important relationships that we will ever have. How well have we done? And I can assure you that almost everyone, unless someone is just totally missing the empathy gene altogether, almost everyone who's facing the end of life will be reflecting on these things, whether they give voice to it or not. You know, and I think we men have a little more difficulty with this than women do, but it's often very difficult for us to talk about these things. And we think about them and we just keep it in instead of talking about it instead. So when we think about families, whether it be parents or siblings or spouses or children, we think of these when we are in the process of dying. We think about the nice words that we wish that we had said, feelings we wish we had expressed, times that we wish we had spent, places that we wish we had gone together. And it's sad that those things would be on a regret list rather than on the playback list of conversations that we've had in life or experiences that we've shared in life. So remind yourself to love and support family. Say I love you on a regular basis. Do things together. And at the end of your journey, you'll rest easy knowing your loved ones know that you cared about them. Again, as you mentioned, that for those who are in the process of dying, there's not a lot of time left. But there can still be time to get past that little hurdle of being uncomfortable saying some of these things, expressing some feelings like I love you and so forth, and just doing it. I can guarantee you that there are probably spouses and children who may have heard that for the first time in their lives from their spouse or parents' deathbed. And I'll guarantee you it'll be something they remember for the rest of their lives. Yeah, Judy?
I think this might be a time when someone would say, I wish I had asked for forgiveness, or I wish I had forgiven someone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we will touch on that a little bit because reconciliation is something that is imperative at the end. And that comes through forgiveness. And so that is something very, very important.
May I share an actual story on that?
Sure.
When my husband was dying, as I mentioned in the talk, we had a family meeting for everybody to know that he was going off the machines and talk about it. And our son Ron was the one who had the most difficulty with that. And Al was at first frustrated, and he was kind of rude to him. He said, you know, you're talking about my life, and I want to do it. It was very unpleasant there for a while. And later on, Al thought about it, thank goodness, and he called Ron up and happened to leave a message on his voicemail. And the message was, Ron, I want you to know I love you. Now, my son kept that message on his voicemail for months and months after that. It meant so much to him. Those are little things and important things.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And for those on the who are keeping watch, over someone who's in the process of dying, one of the things that we can do is try to guide conversations that will open up some of these general areas and try to talk about some of these things from your perspective in a way that you feel comfortable about, and that might help them to feel more comfortable then to express some things. So kind of lead that conversation in those directions to help them know that it's okay, that from what you're saying, they know it's okay for them to talk about this kind of thing. And then they may be willing to do that. But again, we don't want to have these kinds of regrets. My father, who is not doing well, he has mentioned a number of times a regret that he has. When they moved up here about 6 years ago, for the first time in I don't know how many decades, he and his older brother were finally in the same general area. My parents are in Travelers Rest. My uncle was in Greer. And Dad talked about finally we can be together and we can do things together and so forth. But then kind of settled into life, and both of them being in their 80s and so forth, it just takes a little more to get up and out and that sort of thing. And the doing things together, they just didn't do until Uncle Kenneth died unexpectedly, earlier than we thought, without warning, and then the opportunity was lost. And Dad has just said over and over and over again how much he regrets not having those times. So don't let the opportunities pass by. So I wish I had allowed myself to love. We can get really cynical in this world. Just watch the news a lot and you'll get cynical really, really easily. But you can get cynical about relationships with other people. So there are a lot of folks who avoid getting close to others because they don't want to get attached. Because you get attached, you can get hurt. And then sometimes there are petty arguments and grudges with loved ones, and they build a wall that doesn't allow you to forgive until it's too late. And you don't want that to happen. I dare say that most of us could probably identify some family that we've encountered along the way where there's a rift. There's a rift. There are some folks in the family aren't talking with other folks in the family for some reason. And many times if you dig down deep, y'all didn't talk all these years for that? It really wasn't that significant an issue. But people who have friends and close relationships with their families are generally much happier with their lives because they have a support group around them for both the good times and the hard times. And so surrounding yourself with love and allowing yourself to love creates some good memories for those latter days. But again, reconciliation, if there are those kinds of rifts, we want to remember those and get those settled. Now, shift gears a little bit and just think about some things related to some medical or health type matters. How does spirituality relate to some of these things, like diminished interest of the one facing end of life and making treatment decisions? Sometimes, right toward the very end, someone who is facing death, they don't really want to talk that much about it. They may have talked about it earlier with directives and things of that nature, but at the very end, sometimes they're not that interested. And some of it has to do with the fact that the feeling that really what difference does it make at this point? Time is short. What difference does it make? Because how much medication or what particular treatment they undergo at that moment kind of pales in comparison to some of the other things that are going on in their heart and mind at that time. Those transition issues, those what's on the other side type thinking. That's what they're thinking about more than the other. In terms of those advanced directives, someone has said, I expect that this is probably one reason that a lot of folks don't get around to doing those. I expect it will hardly matter to me what kind of treatment I receive when I'm unable even to recognize myself or my loved ones. So why bother? So, and so when there are a lot of struggles with families, when families are involved in this discussion about what kind of treatments for loved ones at end of life, the struggle is often rooted in questions about the spiritual aspects of what's going on, quality of life, that type of thing. The role of pain relief, of course, relief of pain is a clearly important thing. That's right up at the list of things that, top of the list of things that those who are dying want to have taken care of. But, if all the pain is dealt with, there's still other things that are kicking around in the heart and mind of those who are facing death. It doesn't ease the suffering brought on by the fact of the end is near, or the indignity of decline and debility, or the prospect of feeling useless and purposeless in the hospital bed, and things of that nature. So let's not think of pain medication being the end all. There are other things that need to be addressed as well. Chronic illness and nursing home care. Those things trigger a lot of things. When someone is chronically ill or they're in nursing care, if you go down this hallway, and at the end of this hallway, at the left, there are these double doors. Y'all know any people that don't like to go through those double doors? Why? Why? Because it's a harbinger of what the future might be, and we don't want to do that. You know, in Belgium, I understand because of things during World War II that we never knew which neighbors had been recruited to spy on you. They developed this concept called fear of the threshold, and so you just didn't bring people into the house. You just didn't let them cross the threshold. Here at Rolling Green, we have the fear of the double doors, and that's something we need to get over with. Someone brought up something about here. This is a perfect place to make a profound difference in people's lives. There are a lot of people beyond those double doors whose lives could be changed significantly and whose days could be brightened significantly with just a little bit of time and a little bit of attention. So there are a lot of opportunities to make a difference in the lives of those in healthcare, memory care, and things of that nature. And I'll just leave that as my little...
Very rewarding, too.
It is. It really is. The service I do in memory care every week is one of the highlights of my week. I love it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those doors also act as a barrier. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, Amy.
But come with me. I'll take you in there.
Amy Abercrombie, who's the director there, she makes a big point of the fact that these people aren't just waiting to die every day. They're here because they're living each day that they're living. Mm-hmm. And keep that in mind.
Yep. All right, I'm going to kind of move along a little quickly here because I want to get to the faith issues. Just remembering that families are facing a lot of loss. One of the things when families gather, I don't think this would be news to you when families get together. Sometimes it's those family members who live farthest away or those who have been least involved in the care of the family who at the last minute swoop in and are the most insistent in how things should be and demanding that every measure should be taken, even if the one dying has said, let me go, let me go. So that's, of course, I think we can all understand that there's guilt and a desire to atone for the past and all that's a factor in there. Yes?
I have a couple of off-the-wall comments here that maybe people will enjoy or not. But, some years ago, I got together with my brother and sister, and we taped a 2-hour session talking about our youth and our time together when we were kids. Huh. And we made a video of that.
Uh-huh.
And I did that for other friends, and I encourage people to do that. It records it for people.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is a friend of mine told me years ago about you taking the time to write his memoirs, not for his kids, but for his grandchildren. And he said it was, it took him, he figured out it was like a week for one page.
Mm-hmm.
But he did it.
Yeah.
And I'm started. I'm doing it chronologically. I'm up to age 20. Long ways to go, but
yeah.
It's something you can leave behind.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about my father,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's a message I left.
And those will be valuable to your kids. So that's a very good thing. Both of my parents have written their life history and talked about the childhood and family of origin and things of that nature, and we cherish those books. So issues stemming from issues of faith, matters of faith. Talk to me about the truth of religion, I'll listen gladly. Talk to me about the duty of religion, and I'll listen submissively. But don't come talking to me about the consolations of religion, or I shall suspect that you don't understand. C.S. Lewis, one of our most prolific Christian writers. just a reminder of the delicacy of this topic. It's imperative to have an understanding of faith system in order to talk to someone about these matters. You need to know what you're walking into when you raise these issues. Just two quick examples. I believe in God. I believe my husband's in heaven. I intend to be there with him one day. I couldn't go on if I thought we would never be together, so I do have some kind of faith. But right now, that whole pray and trust in God thing kind of makes me want to run the other way. I guess you could say I'm a little bit angry with God right now. He's taken my love away. And then another one, I'm angry at God again. This is a different writer. I don't understand why people have to die at all. It's the nature of the life cycle, but why young people? Her 27-year-old sister had just died. My sister was 27. The kids who died in the storm were teenagers. A bus accident in another city this morning killed kids as well. If God spares one of us, does that mean he's got to take somebody else, like God has a quota? Anyone? What do we say after he takes one so young? Please give me peace. I've done that, but it doesn't come. Please don't take anyone else from me. And then someone else is taken. Where is he? Why do we have to hurt this way? Where's the logic in the suffering? All right. So anytime we have this loss, this kind of loss, spiritual doubts and questions may arise when a loved one dies. And this can cause us to confront and rethink our basic beliefs about God, about religion, about life, and about death, and about the afterlife. But that might be a good thing. It might be a good thing to relook at those. Some turn to God as a source of strength. Others question. We all respond and react to death in different ways. Now, when we read these types of questions that you see on the screen up there, do these questions challenging God's fairness, do they bother you? Do they make you uncomfortable? Well, I'd encourage you, don't be uncomfortable with that. Odds are you may ask some of those questions someday yourself. But these are common and I think sometimes necessary questions as a part of the grieving process. And you know what? God's a big guy, and he can take those questions. He had questions like that from Abraham, from Jacob, Jeremiah, David, Jonah. The list could go on. They fired some pretty hard questions at God about his nature. And you know what? He continued to use them. And in some cases used them even more. So let's not be afraid of asking questions. Some things to think about. Whether a strong religious faith will be a help or a hindrance in your recovery from grief depends on what you believe, how your beliefs are practiced. Like any tool, religion can be used in healthy, appropriate ways, or it can be abused in unhealthy, inappropriate ways. And some things, other things to think about. Religion can influence your fundamental view of life. You can see it as temporary and death is permanent, or you can see it the other way around, that death is temporary and life is permanent. Death may interrupt a life that was very special, but for many people of faith, it does not cancel the life. Life continues. Religion can also provide the motivation required for grief recovery because it reminds us that we are not alone. Now, what religion cannot do, it can't give us immunity from loss. I don't know why we would ever expect that it would. It doesn't give us immunity from loss or give us back our lost loved ones, nor can it provide us with a shortcut through grief. It just doesn't work that way. Now, I'll give you a couple of things about, I had an old New Testament professor who said, always save the most controversial things for the end, and so the bell would ring before people could ask questions. So I'm trying to work toward that today. So religious beliefs that can be harmful. Death is God's will and should not be questioned. Well, I'm not sure about that. In the sense that death is a part of life, it's part of the created order. Yes, we can say that, but that death happens when it does, in the way it does, to whom it does, at any given time. I'm not so sure about that. In his book, Grievers Ask, Harold Smith addresses the question, where was God when my son died? In this passage, he quotes theologian William Sloane Coffin Jr. following the drowning death of his son Alexander. And this is what Coffin said. The one thing that should never be said when someone dies is, it is God's will. Never do we know enough to be able to say that. My own condition lies in knowing that it was not the will of God that let Alex die. That when the waves closed over the sinking car, God's heart was the first of all of our hearts to break. Now, I think we need to be careful with that platitude of this was God's will. Be a little careful. By the way, one other little commercial. One little book by Leslie D. Weatherhead, who was a Methodist pastor in London during World War II. A book called The Will of God. I found it to be very, very helpful in trying to understand how God's will applies in the messiness of life. Because he talks about God's ideal will and then God's circumstantial will when things change, and then God's ultimate will. In the end, what is it that he desires? And so in that sense, when we look at it that way, yes, we can see God's will at work in everything. But I really feel sorry for God sometimes, the things he gets blamed for. So, okay, hope the bell will ring soon. The person was so special that God called him or her to be with him. I don't think many people find great comfort in there. There must be a grand plan or purpose, a why for every death. Now, here's some religious beliefs that may be helpful instead. What do y'all think about this world we live in? I see the thumbs down. It is a mortal, frail, and imperfect world, and tragedies do occur. Can we stipulate that? Pardon? Yeah. I mean, this is the world we live in. This is the world we live in. This is the reality of the world in which we live. So we just stipulate to the fact that tragedies do happen. And they happen to both the good and the bad. There's no satisfactory explanation when loss occurs. If you may, I don't know if you remember the service of remembrance last year. One of the things I just kept hitting on again and again and again is don't get bogged down in the why question. There usually aren't answers to the why question. You may have them down the road, but if you just park on the side of the road until you get your answer, exactly, and that's the problem. If you don't move through grief, you're going to just be stuck there. The question is not why me, but rather if me, what can I learn from this? So we do need to move from the why questions to the how questions. How can you work through this loss and achieve as full a life as possible? How can you use this experience to help someone else? How do you find meaning in life without this person? And how do you start all over again? Now, just to kind of shift a gear real quickly for those, sorry, I had one more slide on it. For coping with spiritual reactions, recognize that a new faith can grow from grief. Consider talking to a minister, priest, rabbi, or pastoral counselor. Make space in your schedule for daily meditation or prayer for some quiet time. Explore and question the values and beliefs. It's okay. It's okay to question. It really is. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. And consider grief as an encounter with life's greatest mysteries. And I would suggest that we learn to be comfortable with mystery. I don't care how much you get figured out, there's still mystery out there. So we need to be comfortable with mystery. Now, I'm going to shift gears for the loved ones of the dying, especially if you're in the caregiving role. And I would just say this very quickly in passing. Beware the risk of losing yourself. That would be so easy to do. So be attentive to your own spirituality and, more importantly, the meaning of your life. It may involve a temporary reinterpretation or re-envisioning of your purpose for the time being, But be careful about that. Okay, the final journey, the end draws near, and that includes the presentation. What is a good death or an appropriate death? For an appropriate death, internal conflicts should be reduced as much as possible. If they're struggling with issues in their heart, mind, soul, try to help them find resolution of that so they can die in peace. The individual's personal sense of identity should be sustained. Help them remember who they are. Don't let them forget about that. Critical relationships should be enhanced or at least maintained, and if possible, going back to what Judy talked about with forgiveness and reconciliation, conflicts resolved. That's just so important. And then be encouraged to set and attempt to reach meaningful, even though they would be limited, goals, whatever those might be. Could just be hanging on until someone gets there from out of state. But just, why don't you wait here until my older brother gets here, something like that. Then keep in mind the primary concerns of the dying: adequate pain and symptom management. We talked about that. Avoiding inappropriate prolongation of dying. Achieving a sense of control. This is one thing that they would like. It may not be a whole lot, but any way that they can still have control, do that. Relieving burden. So many people are afraid of being a burden to others. Leaving a burden, financial or whatever, to spouse or kids, whatever. And then strengthening relationships with loved ones. 3, basic spiritual needs as one faces end of life. 1, the affirmation that one's life has had meaning. The one facing the end of life may go through a review, so help them go through the story. Help them walk through the story. And you want it to be a good story. So help that review process with visits, photo albums, trading stories, whatever it might be, but help them go through that review process. But especially let them know, and this is where you say things, especially say to them how important they were to you, how much you love them, how much they affected your life. So let them hear that from you. The second out of the third one, dying an appropriate death. To die in a way that's consistent with one's values, wishes, or pattern of life, and that could be different from others. For some, it might be a peaceful, even graceful exit from this world. To others, it's going to be a fight to the end. That's just who they are. They're going to fight to the bitter end. Burning, maybe even raging. They're not going to go gently into that good night. And some others might follow Woody Allen's thing. I don't mind dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. And then finally, finding hope beyond death through faith, religion, spirituality, heaven, afterlife, reincarnation. There we go. And that legacy, beyond death, people have different ideas. Heaven, reincarnation, whatever it might be. But for some, may not have that, but they still think of living on through their children, through those lives that were impacted that we talked about earlier, through the work, the legacy of work that they leave behind or accomplishments in life. But that's one of the things that is very important to those who are passing, to know that it will matter that I was. And I think that's a very important thing for all of us. All right. The bell should be ringing right now. But if somebody does have a question. Oh, okay. All right. Good.
That was fantastic. I really appreciate that. I hope the other people do. And how well it tied in to planning ahead, giving the gift of love.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.